On Tech News Today, European privacy regulators tell Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo to answer questions about how they're obeying Europe's right-to-be-forgotten rules. Plus, Putin offers cash for anyone who can help him identify and track down Tor users. Google's buying Twitch, just like we told you they would, and we talked to a famous technology columnist who now writes comedy for HBO's Silicon Valley. All that and more coming up right now on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, July 25th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used Apple and Android devices are worth at Gazelle.com. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan. With me, of course, is Jason Howell.
Good morning, everybody.
There he
Good
is.
to be here.
In all his glory. And also we have Don Reisinger, an independent technology columnist.
Wait,
How you doing,
that
Don?
Glory? That's
Glory.
what Jason is? That's his glory?
Yes, he is a glorious. Yeah,
See?
thank you.
Oh.
The music
Can we
helps.
put like a halo around him? That'd be cool.
I'll try.
Editing.
This isn't a Google
that'd be
Hangout, you know. Things like that aren't very easy, Don.
So Jason and Don, today is a yet another special day. Today is Sysadmin Appreciation Day. So if you have a sysadmin, a system administrator in your life, give them a hug for all they do because they work hard
give them
to
a
keep
kiss.
everything up
Give
and
them
running.
a kiss.
It depends.
Make it really personal.
It depends on what they look like. Oh, look, there's even somebody giving them a hug, and if you're watching the video, it's using the pun there. So there are a number of suggestions about how to appreciate your local sysadmin. One is cake and ice cream. Another one is pizza, a card, a letter, flowers, all very appropriate. So sysadmins, we love you. And there you go. We did it.
Yes.
So, Don Reisinger, why don't we jump right into the news? We reported on yesterday's show that Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo were summoned by EU privacy regulators to talk about their implementation of Europe's right-to-be-forgotten rules. Sam Schechner is a tech correspondent for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at the Wall Street Journal, and he joins us now from Paris to tell us what happened in that meeting. Welcome, Sam.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get into yesterday's meeting, can you describe the whole right-to-be-forgotten issue? What is required of search engines and why?
Well, there's a European Data Protection Directive that dates back to 1995, and there was a decision by Europe's top court back in May that search engines need to, under that law, allow individuals across Europe to get specific links about them removed from their search results on Google or really any search engine if there's not some preponderant public interest in having the link between that person and that information. And that's obviously, it was a huge surprise. The court previously had been advised by its own judge advocate general to not take that position. So nobody was really expecting it, least of all Google. And so now we're set into this strange world where Google has to receive all of these complaints from across Europe and decide, do this balancing test. Gee, is it in the public interest that this person have this link in their results or not? And so far, Google has found in almost half the, or a little more than half the cases, that it should remove links from people's results. And I actually tracked down somebody who'd successfully done that on a story that appeared in the Wall Street Journal in 1998. I talked to him on the phone, and he said that story had been following him around for the better part of 2 decades, and he wanted it gone. So, that's the background. I guess the question, go ahead.
No, Sam, I'm sorry. I apologize. I just want to take a step back for a minute. Yesterday there were reports that Yahoo, Google, Microsoft were all summoned to the EU to talk about the EU's issue with the fact that while these things are being handled in Europe and they're being hidden in Europe, the search results, they're not being hidden in the US or wherever else. So if you're in the UK, you have something that you want removed, it's removed. If you go to google.com, that doesn't happen. How do you feel about that? Is that something that those companies, A, responded to? Were they questioned on it? B, and thirdly, is that something they're going to have to incorporate into their plans going forward?
Well, just to be clear, when something's removed, what we're saying is like, we search for Sam Schechner and it doesn't appear in my results, but it still would appear in somebody else's results. And even in Europe, I can still get to it if I click to Google.com. And so that's what the regulators have been angry at Google about. And actually, I reported last week in the run-up to this meeting, they've been pushing Google to change this and to make it either globally applicable or at least applicable to all searches in Europe, because they're not so easy to get around. It's a big issue. Google feels very strongly that people should have the right to sort of travel on the internet, in a sense that you can sort of experience the internet as if you were in different parts of the world. Yep. The regulators don't feel that way, and yes, they did question Google. They asked all three companies that were there what their policy is on this, and that's with an eye to potentially challenging it when they issue guidelines in the fall.
Now, now you reported that they, well, before we get into my question, just to further clarify, this is about the use of someone's name as a search term, and that's it. And so it basically what appears when somebody's name is used as a search query within a search engine of any kind. Of course, this is supposed to apply to all search engines equally. Now, when you basically published a list of some of the questions they were asked, of all the questions they were asked, can you give us a sense of what some of these questions were and exactly what they were getting at with those questions?
Well, I mean, some of them are really, basic. I mean, literally one of the questions was, give us contact information in case we need to follow up with you. But the big issues that they're getting at, that they asked about, were this one that you asked about, territoriality. Another one that's really caused a lot of anxiety or raised issues for these regulators that they asked about is the notification that Google gives when it has removed a link from somebody's name search results. It tells the webmaster of the site in question that it's been removed. Now, if that site in question is owned by a newspaper, maybe the webmaster gives it to the to a source on the news side, and then suddenly there's an article about it, and then it's easy to track down who asked for the thing to be removed, and suddenly, voila, we've got the Streisand effect. And we've seen that played out in a number of publications. We saw it at The Guardian, we saw it in the story that I did at the Wall Street Journal, and that has raised, for the regulators, the issue of, is Google undermining the rule? So they specifically asked them, what justification do you have?
They asked about the legal basis of it, right? The legal basis for notifying. Isn't free speech the legal basis?
Well, when they say legal basis, they're talking about European data protection law. And you're only allowed to process an individual's data if you have what's called a legal basis to do it. The default is that no data can be processed. So the law establishes legal bases for processing data, and that's what they're referring to when they say that. So freedom of speech is not a legal basis under that rule.
Well, Sam, I look at this all. We're here with Sam Schechner of the Wall Street Journal. Sam, at what point does the EU regulator power end, and at what point do other countries have some say in this? It almost feels as though the EU regulators are trying to manipulate search results, or at least take control over search results worldwide. Is that really where we need to be? I mean, should they have that kind of power?
Well, far be it for me to say what kind of power they should or shouldn't have, or any other regulator. I'll say this: they do have, I think, a goal in Europe of being a standard-setting, entity for the world when it comes to privacy. And that comes with good and bad. So I mean, on the good side, and you could look at it in terms of consumer protection as well, in the U.S. and things like seatbelts, rules that have been applied in some of these larger economies end up de facto becoming the rules across a whole region. California air rules for cars end up becoming the de facto rules for cars across the U.S. Europe has that goal in data protection. Now, the danger, if you talk to any of these search engines, is they say, okay, let's say even we don't care about the right to be forgotten. Do we want any country to be able to do the same thing? Do we want the world's freedom of speech rules defined by the rules in Russia, in China? And that's where it starts to trouble a lot of people in the tech world and in the freedom of speech industry, or freedom of speech activists as well.
Now they of course brought Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo as the major search engines to this meeting and asked them those questions. There are hundreds of search engines. Will they be sending these questions to those other search engines, or is this just are these three companies being singled out?
Well, they said today that they're going to consider meeting with other actors, and so I think that they may indeed meet with others. I think other search engines have come to them and said, we would like some guidance on how to handle this. The reality is that they probably didn't need to invite Microsoft or Yahoo to this because they're just not really major players in the search engine game in Europe. If you look at some of the market share, I think Yahoo and Microsoft, which both use Microsoft's technology, have, I think, a total of 5% market share of searches in Europe. Maybe it's a little higher than that, but it's not a huge amount.
Back to your seatbelt analogy, that would be similar to just requiring the major car companies to have seatbelts and not really requiring of the smaller ones. It seems to me.
Well, I think that the rule applies to everyone.
Okay.
The purpose of this meeting was not to, as they said today, wasn't to apply the rule to them. The rule applies. Now, because there's 28 different countries in Europe and they each have their own data protection authority, all 28 authorities are part of this body called the Article 29 Working Party. Yes, Europe is filled with insane bureaucracy. This body is charged with trying to make everyone work together. What they've decided to do, which seems like a reasonable idea, is to come up with one interpretation of what the ruling means and guidelines so that all search engines know what to do. To help them come up with those guidelines, which they're going to publish in September, October, sometime in the fall, they invited the three biggest search engines or the three big American ones. And it is true, some of those, some people that I've spoken to thought it was odd that they singled out those companies for perhaps a tongue lashing, but that they invited them to answer questions to help inform the process of putting those guidelines. But they've been very clear that they believe they will apply to all search engines. And actually, the real question I think that we should be asking ourselves, or a real question, is how much further might it apply? I mean, what is a search engine really? And do companies might it apply someday to a company like Facebook, to Twitter, to the search function on a website that isn't solely about search? That's a question that's yet to be resolved.
Now, I'm fascinated by your situation because you're writing about this issue as an American in Paris. And so as an American, you're fully aware of the U.S. obsession with freedom of speech and with the political climate here. And as somebody who's reporting in and living in Europe and in Paris, you're aware of the European obsession with privacy and all that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering if you've sort of run up against that that sort of conflict. I mean, you know that if they actually go ahead and force Google or try to force Google to remove search queries or meddle with the search engine results at all in the United States, forget about the rest of the world. I mean, this is going to be the #1 issue in the upcoming political campaign. This is going to be like the huge. This is the screaming headlines on the cable news shows is going to be that Europe is, violating the First Amendment. That wouldn't be accurate at all, but that's. That's going to be a huge issue here. What's it like to be reporting on this issue, I guess, is the question, as an American in Europe?
Well, I think it's a fascinating time to be here because, this is just one area where you have these big, powerful U.S. companies running up against, I guess, just uncomfortableness from some of the European regulators. We saw it. We talked about Facebook and WhatsApp and that deal running up against problems in Europe. So as an American here, I guess sometimes you have to make clear to the people you're talking to that, I'm not a representative of these companies, nor am I, because I live here, a representative of Europe. I'm just trying to report on the situation, and it's helpful to have the perspective on both sides that I do. It's certainly a fascinating time to be writing about these issues.
Well, if Europe doesn't particularly like the Google search engine, they're going to love the Google smart contact lenses, I can tell you that. Sam Schechner is at WSJ.com, writes for the Wall Street Journal, and you can follow him on Twitter at Sam, I'm going to spell that, SAMSCHECH. Thank you so much for joining us on Tech News Today.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, in just a sec, we're going to tell you about the new Russian policy on the Tor network. But first, I want to tell you about Gazelle. Gazelle wants to buy your used gadget, and believe me, if you've got gadgets lying around, you want to sell them to Gazelle because they'll take a worthless piece of junk that's sitting in your drawer gathering dust, and they will give you really good money for it because somebody out there will want to use that device, and it's doing you no good as it sits there declining in value in a box in your garage, wherever that stuff is. Just go to Gazelle.com. That's Gazelle.com. and just identify in their database your device, tell what condition it's in, and then you get the price. And they'll pay you fast by check, PayPal, or you get an additional 5% off if you use the Amazon gift card option. I think that's great for anyone who uses Amazon. I think almost all of us do. It's just like free extra money. And again, you get paid in cash and you get paid fast. Offers are good for 30 days. So if you lock in a price today, even if the value of that device declines, they will honor it almost a month later. And that's really great. They'll also wipe your data so that your private information won't get in the wrong hands. You don't have to be an expert about erasing your data. You should erase it. It's always a good practice. But if you don't, they will wipe it, and they will wipe it even if you do. So no matter what happens, they will secure your data. Now, Gazelle's paid more than $100 million to more than 700,000 customers. And, of course, processing is fast, no listing hassles. They send you a box, you put the phone in the box, you put the sticker on the box, and off it goes, and you get paid. So find out what your Apple or Android device is worth. Take a minute, go to Gazelle.com and find out. And do it now, because your device may lose value the longer you wait. Well done, Reisinger. It's kind of an interesting fact that Edward Snowden, who leaked the NSA documents, has publicly recommended that people use the Tor browser, and then he ran off to Russia. The Russian government has an entirely different view of Tor. Can you tell us what's going on there?
So there's something rather interesting going on in Russia. The government's official procurement site has posted essentially an RFP requesting that anyone within Russia, researchers, anyone really around the world, I guess, technically, that can provide the Russian government with the ways in which it can breach the Tor network and find anonymous user data will receive roughly 4 million rubles, which comes out to about $114,000. This, in my mind, Mike, is just another in a long list of potential issues we are seeing in Russia in terms of an anonymity and its issues with anonymity. But really, it's a response to the fact that as internet regulations have become more stringent in Russia, the number of people that are actually going anonymous in Russia, that number is going up. When it was at 80,000, it's now at 200,000. And the Russian government is saying, well, all of these people are essentially going underground. Tor allows people to browse the internet with just about complete anonymity. And the Russian government is saying, well, you're going underground and we want to find you. So it's an interesting development here, Mike. And I want to know from you, is this something that makes sense for the Russian government as we know it today? Or is this something that's going to backfire and create even more people going to Tor and using Tor and trying to sidestep a lot of those onerous regulations in Russia?
Quite the opposite. I think that a big part of this is to scare people away from Tor. I think that having them announce this with a big splashy announcement is one way that Vladimir Putin can sort of get people to stop using it, because, of course, it's frustrating them, it's frustrating the NSA and so on. And I think it's also interesting that this happens in the backdrop of a recent news development, which is that a Russian researcher, he's originally from Russia, currently is at Carnegie Mellon University. His name is Alexander Volyunkin, and he basically was scheduled to speak at Black Hat, which begins next week. Black Hat being a hacker and security conference. He was going to announce how you can crack Tor, and he said that anybody with $3,000 is all it would take to basically figure out who Tor users are. You could essentially do exactly what Vladimir Putin is saying that the Russian government is willing to pay for. And what happened was that lawyers for the university pulled the plug on that talk. He also happens to write, to work at this Alexander guy, works for a division within Carnegie Mellon Research that is funded by the U.S. military. And so that's another thing. They've said that they didn't pressure the lawyers to pull the plug. We don't know why they pulled the plug. And it's also interesting that Tor was actually developed with help from the U.S. Navy. So I think this is a lot of FUD mostly. But if somebody comes forward and shows the Russian government how they can find people who are using Tor, then that will be, that's sort of the cheap way to crack it. You just basically pay someone to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's not forget also that this isn't just Russia. The governments around the world, the U.S. included, have all taken issue with Tor. They've all said that that's the gateway for people to go to the web and do illegal things. They were using the Tor to get to the Silk Road. They're doing it to get to forums to talk about how to create child porn sites. They're doing all kinds of things, according to reports. And they're saying, we don't like Tor. So the Russian government is almost taking this stance that, yeah, look, we're just one of the bunch. We're just doing what everyone else is saying or thinking, and we're doing it this way in a more transparent fashion. Now, I agree with you, Mike, that I think it's probably a lot of fun, but it begs the question of privacy again. At what point is privacy allowable for governments around the world? There appears to be a level at which certain governments are willing to allow privacy. The Middle East, that level might be a little lower. Russia, that level might be a little lower. North Korea, that level might be a little lower. The U.S. may be a little higher than those. But are they? It seems as though governments around the world are all coming to some sort of level, something that is allowable by their own governments and allowable for their own hopes of security. And the people that are actually using the web need to fall into line. And that's what's concerning to me, whether it's with Tor or whether it's any of this stuff of privacy. We're all being told exactly how much privacy we're allowed and nothing more.
Well, I think this will never be resolved. There will always be an arms race between governments who want to figure out what criminals and terrorists and people who are just dissidents are doing. And the public, a best case scenario,
potentially you and I,
yeah,
according to certain leaks,
sure,
right?
Absolutely, and you know, China's sort of spy agencies are very much into what journalists write about. They hack the New York Times to find out what journalists were working on regarding dissidents in China and so on. But I think the best case we can hope for is for the democratic governments to have safeguards to prevent certain types of people from being hacked. But I don't think there'll ever be a case where any government will simply say, oh, yeah, you know, we're just going to let everybody be private. We're not going to try to crack these things. They will try to crack them. And it's kind of interesting also that Edward Snowden revealed the NSA's attempt to crack Tor. There was an NSA presentation called Tor Stinks. And then it went on to say how we would never be able to de-anonymize all Tor users all the time. So apparently Tor is pretty good. That's why Edward Snowden personally recommended it. And so we'll keep an eye on this and see if Russia, if anybody steps forward to claim the prize. I don't know if they'll announce it or not, but kind of an interesting approach that Russia's taking there. Well, we told you on May 19th that Google intended to buy Twitch, a popular service for live streaming video games. Now VentureBeat's Dean Takahashi is reporting that the deal has been done, and the price is $1 billion. Google's YouTube will use Twitch to dominate the market of gamers who broadcast gameplay and also audience who like to watch video gaming as a spectator sport. Dean Takahashi is with us now. He's the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat. Welcome, Dean Takahashi.
Hello, Mike.
Now, $1 billion, that seems like a really high price. What do you think YouTube will do with Twitch exactly?
Well, they are definitely using it to sort of protect their user base. You know, a lot of gamers go to YouTube, they post their videos, you know, they make funny videos, whatever it is, and YouTube has been the go-to place for this sort of pre-created videos that you upload to the site. But Twitch has, you know, come on the scene in the last 3 years as a streaming site. You can stream your gameplay live, and you can watch, use Twitch to be a spectator, watch competitive sports, you know, game tournaments. You can watch people play and comment on their own gameplay in a live fashion. So live streaming, as in a lot of other parts of the internet, is really taking off in gaming, and YouTube and Google want to be a part of this, and that's why they're doing this deal.
Right. So, you know, Dean, I have a lot of cynicism about this deal. I think it's too much. I don't think, I mean, we go back to 2006 when YouTube was acquired by Google for $1.65 billion. Now we're saying that Twitch is worth $1 billion. That says something, I think, about valuations today. But I think it also says something about YouTube And the fact that, we've heard reports on several occasions over the last several months that YouTube is having some trouble generating the kind of revenue it wants. It just lost its music head. There's no idea now when its music streaming service is going to launch in full swing and actually be something that people want. Is this Google's attempt, because it has so much money and it's not worried about spending money, to just try to find something it can use to integrate into YouTube and make some money off of it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this company wouldn't exist if YouTube wasn't really asleep at the switch and didn't really sort of catch on to the phenomenon that Twitch picked up on. The rise of competitive sports, the fun of spectating, watching somebody else play a game. Nobody thought these things were going to be real. But Twitch had this vision 3 years ago. You talk about their valuation. It's hard to say exactly how much money they're making, but they did. Back in May when the deal first was reported, they had 45 million monthly active users. Now they say they have 50 million. So the rate of growth of Twitch is very impressive, and definitely if Google had been sort of paying attention, all of that growth would have been theirs.
Now, of course, YouTube has a new CEO who's Susan Wojcicki. She's been with the company for many, many years, mostly in the advertising realm. And one of the things that Twitch has been doing, they've been really sort of innovative in what they've been diversifying themselves into. But they have deals now to distribute shows from GameSpot, Joystick, Destructoid. Presumably those are like video podcast type things. Is this part of that, Dean, that YouTube wants to get more? This is also a kind of an acquisition of some programming, if you will, sort of television-like programming.
Yeah, they're also like live streaming our GameSpeak 2014 conference too.
Nice.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, people say are watching fewer shows, watching fewer shows on TV, turning more to the internet. And the more you can get your hands on live programming, the better. YouTube's also had this controversy of paying bloggers to say nice things about games and products, and that has hurt them in some recent days. The fallout from that is sort of yet to be seen, but it's another thing that hurts Google and YouTube in games. Twitch doesn't have this kind of stain on it.
Interesting. Go ahead, Don. I think you have a question.
Yeah, no, Dean, I just look at this again, and 50 million users. It's sort of a niche, I think, with gaming still. I think gaming has gone mainstream, but 50 million users doesn't really blow my socks off in this world where YouTube has 1 billion users and Facebook more than 1 billion and things like that. I guess at the end of the day, my question is, for YouTube, how successful do you think YouTube is going to be at integrating Twitch, making Twitch grow, and making Twitch generate the kind of revenue it needs in order to return at least some return on this investment? I think when you look at all of this whole deal, and you say, gee, that's a lot of money for a service that's not that big in the grand scheme of things. How is YouTube going to make this right with investors that are going to ask, why are we spending $1 billion on something that we may never see that money back on?
Well, I don't have the spreadsheet for Twitch's results in front of me, but I would guess that the revenues that they get from advertising are pretty good. They also have an economy built into Twitch too, where they have 1.1 million broadcasters, and those people can get paid for having a large audience. They make a share of the revenue from the ads, so there's a sort of a built-in catalyst for growth and a better sort of financial performance inside Twitch. I think anybody who's paying a lot of money for an acquisition these days. I mean, you could argue that Twitch at $1 billion could be a bargain compared to $2 billion that Facebook paid for Oculus VR, which has no customers. It has zero people buying products from it, except dev kits, right? So the valuations are something that are very relative. Google has this kind of cash. You can afford it. Definitely keeping a company like Twitch out of the hands of competitors who could also take it and grow it and do a lot of damage to YouTube. It seems like a strategic move. Whether it makes financial sense, I just don't have enough, detailed numbers in front of me to tell me that.
And by competitors, I think the main competitor would be Microsoft, who is rumored to be in the running to buy this company. And apparently, as far as we can tell, they were probably outbid by Google. Dean Takahashi is at VentureBeat.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at DeanTalk. That's DeanTak. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your exclusive.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Don, trouble in Cupertino. What is Apple going through these days?
Like, there's never trouble in Cupertino. Come on. I mean, there's never any trouble over there. So, look, the U.S. District Court Judge Denise Cody, who was presiding over the Apple ebook price-fixing lawsuit, is saying that the settlement arrangement that Apple made, where it would potentially pay $450 million to consumers in part, and then also as part of the damages and the legal fees and all that, is becoming a bit troubling to her, because here's the issue. Apple has appealed this case where it was found to be guilty of fixing prices, has appealed this case to the Circuit of Appeals. Now, in the event Apple wins that circuit and that her judgment was off and that Apple was not, in fact, embarking on this grand scheme, this grand antitrust scheme to take down Amazon, the company will only need to pay $70 million, $50 million of which will go to consumers. So the judge said this is extremely troubling. This is most troubling, she said it to be precise, because Apple is supposed to be guilty here, supposed to be, and yet it's working its way potentially into not having to pay nearly as much as we believe Apple should. And this is let's one more point here. The $450 million is the settlement. Apple was supposed to go to court in August and face the judge again for a damages trial, which could have exceeded well into potentially more than $1 billion. So Apple has sidestepped the $1 billion damages by going with a settlement. And if everything goes well in the circuit court and it can win its appeal, that number then goes down to $70 million. And so the judge here believes this could hurt consumers. Mike, does this hurt consumers? Is this a bad thing?
Well, it's certainly better for the consumers to get more money than it is for them to get less money. It's hard to imagine how much damage or harm was actually caused when people voluntarily purchased books at a price that they thought was reasonable for that book. So it's not like people have been like run out of their homes or anything. We're talking about a few dollars more for a book, a few dollars more, by the way, than the subsidized price that Amazon was paying, taking at a loss in many cases. I mean, this is what bugs me about this whole case. Yes, Apple in general, and Steve Jobs in particular, did some shady dealings here by essentially price fixing. However, they were trying to deal with a situation that's perfectly legal and acceptable, which is where Amazon uses all the resources at its disposal to sell prices below cost to drive competitors out of the market, so that once those companies go out of business, they can raise prices as a monopoly and charge far more. They've done it in certain submarkets, especially in the education market. So I think the big problem here, the elephant in the living room, is why is it legal for Amazon to sell below cost to drive competitors out of the market, but it's illegal for Apple to essentially say, okay, we're going to use the model where you set the price, publishers, and we get a percentage. That's what they did. They didn't set a price. They didn't say the price is $12.99. Apple said, it's up to you to set the price, publishers, not us. And all we ask is our normal cut. That is, to me, although it's egregious because it's, behind the, backroom deals, it's not as egregious as driving competitors out of the market to establish a monopoly by selling at a loss. And so, yes, I mean, the laws are what the laws are, but the laws need to be changed. That's my opinion on this.
Yeah, Mike, and you and I have talked about this on several occasions now. We keep going back to Amazon, and we keep going back to our concerns about Amazon, and the simple reality so far that Amazon has been able to sidestep everything, whether it's this case, whether it's some issues as it relates to privacy and its new Fire smartphone, like you talked about a few weeks back. Amazon has found a way, which is rather interesting, the way it's done. And I'd like to see more research into exactly why. Is it lobbying? Is it simply that Amazon is not viewed as a major issue in the antitrust space? Or is it something else? But Amazon has been able to sidestep every single potential pitfall in all of these cases. Apple and Google have been hit hard by the EU. They've been hit hard by the US. They've been hit hard by China and other regulators around the world. When is Amazon going to finally get its due? I really is the question you're asking and the one I guess I'm asking. And looking at the frontier here, I don't see it happening anytime soon, especially in the ebook space. The judge here and everyone that's essentially litigating this case is saying that Amazon was just a victim. That's all they're saying. And I think, as you point out correctly, Amazon wasn't really a victim here necessarily. They were a victim to some degree, not a major victim. And ultimately, it could be the consumer that loses if Amazon wins or Apple wins or anyone wins. Ultimately, it's competition that's going to help us, not one company getting its way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an interesting story, and again, it's one judge, and even if Apple loses this one, it's still pocket change for Apple. I think the bigger issue is not how much Apple has to pay, but what are the rules around preventing monopolies in books? I think that's a terrible market for anyone to have anything that resembles a monopoly. Well, Google's got a new moonshot project, and the goal is to hack human health. Specifically, Google's new so-called baseline study wants to collect anonymous genetic and molecular information. I don't know what molecular information is, but hopefully we'll find out in the weeks ahead.
Molecules.
On thousands of people, and they want to run Google algorithms on that data and discover patterns that could be useful in treating or preventing diseases. I think this is a great use of Google's core competency, which is the creation of algorithm and crunching big data. I mean, essentially what they want to do is at first they're going to start with 175 people to give all kinds of data about their genetics and so on, and then later it's going to be thousands of people. This will be anonymized before it's given to Google. So what Google actually receives will be information that contains no information about who the people actually are. And then they're going to look for patterns. For example, they're going to find out that, left-handed people who also have freckles are more likely to, to have skin cancer or something. I don't know, whatever it is, but they're going to look for these patterns which can then be applied to the prevention and the treatment of diseases. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's getting more attention than it deserves, quite frankly. I mean, Google is the reason this is getting so much attention is Google. This is really a big data story. This is really, there are several companies right now competing in the big data space that are saying, okay, how are we going to take all of this already anonymous information and compact it and make it actionable in some way? So Google is now jumping into the fray. Google, I think, does this quite a bit. And secondly, Google likes to do this because it has the ability to get the kind of attention that it otherwise wouldn't, or that other companies wouldn't. And so maybe this is a bigger story, I think, than anything else, but it's nice to keep an eye on it and see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they have lots of money and lots of data centers. So yeah, it's kind of exciting, and you may be right, but it's good that somebody out there is doing this kind of work. Well, Don, looks like a strange integration is coming up around Facebook.
Yeah, interesting. Facebook and Uber are reportedly in preliminary talks to integrate Uber's car service into Facebook Messenger. Now, it's an interesting move here because we saw last week that Facebook was testing out the buy feature and just saying, look, we test features all the time. This buy thing, it could or could not come to Facebook Messenger. Facebook Messenger in April had about 200 million users, so it's not small. But this is essentially, in my mind, Facebook's attempt to bring some sort of value to Messenger. I mean, you have all of these messaging services out there. It's hard for any one company to really make a splash. And I think Facebook sees that. And Facebook is saying, okay, maybe we can make it a little bit more useful, make it a little bit more valuable to people by integrating Uber into this and allowing people to use Messenger wherever they are to get some car service. So interesting move. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. As I said, this is preliminary in nature, so we don't know what the future holds. But interesting, huh, Mike?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think the most interesting aspect of this is that they are toying with the idea of turning Messenger into an e-commerce platform. Why? Because Asian competitors like WeChat and Line are doing that. These messaging services start out as these super popular messaging services, and then they convert themselves into essentially, you know, buy this type of stuff, and they're getting micropayments. So I don't think Facebook is the type of company that wants to leave pennies on the table, especially when pennies are coming from more than 1 billion users. So I think they're just toying with it. And like Zuckerberg said in their earnings call this week, they're going to take this kind of thing very slowly and do things right. So I don't think anything is imminent, including a formal announcement of an actual product resulting from this discussion. So we'll see how that goes. Well, former Newsweek writer Dan Lyons, who was a guest co-anchor on this show back in April, made a huge career change by becoming a writer for the HBO comedy series Silicon Valley. He's working on season 2, and Dan joins us now to talk about his new role. He's joining us by telephone. Welcome, Dan Lyons.
Hi, hey, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Now, Dan, Silicon Valley is, in my opinion, an amazing show. Not only is the comedy writing fantastic, but the show is an incredibly accurate and savvy look at the culture of Silicon Valley in general and the culture of hardcore nerds and engineers in particular. But for you personally, who's spent your whole career as a writer of columns and technology columns and business columns, what's it like to write comedy?
Well, it's really fun sometimes, but it's also really intense and actually really hard work. And I guess I wasn't surprised by that, but I'm in a room with there's 10 writers on the show, and these are, you know, professionally funny people who have been writing comedy for years, and they're really good. And it's a little intimidating to sort of have to sit in a room and pitch ideas with these guys. But also, you know, from a selfish perspective, I'm learning just a huge amount, just sitting there and just absorbing stuff and listening to these guys talk and see how they thicken a story. They'll start with a very small premise and then, you know, talk it around, and pretty soon it's much, much bigger. And at the end of the day, you go, how do we get from where we were in the morning to this? And it's fascinating, but it's really, really interesting and a lot of fun.
Hey, Dan, you know, obviously you made your name in some way, and I mean, not only just being a well-renowned journalist, but also with the fake Steve Jobs stuff. One of the characters on the show, Ehrlich, almost aspires to be Steve Jobs. Is that going to be your central gig? Is that going to be your specialty? Like really fleshing out that character and seeing how you can make him the funny Steve Jobs in some way?
You know, I wondered that before it came out, because, you know, I developed a TV show based on the fake Steve Jobs book a few years ago, and sold it to a cable channel and wrote a few episodes, but then they never got produced. But that's how I ended up on this job, because the people I worked with on that show know some of the people on this show. So, and I wondered, are they having me out to do Ehrlich but no, not really. It's just everybody kind of kicks in on everything, and then each of us will write one episode, I think. So, but the episode you write is based on an outline that the room has created collaboratively, and really there's a head writer, a showrunner, and it's really he and Mike Judge are the kind of guys who ultimately shape the show. So we're all kind of, you know, worker ants or something. But no, so they don't assign it that way. It's not like, okay, you're the Ehrlich guy and you're the Richard guy and you're the Jared person. It's not. It didn't break up like that. But I think I do have some. I probably feel more comfortable with the Ehrlich character and what he might do in a certain situation based on that. But yeah, but it's not like I got assigned Ehrlich. Because I like Ehrlich. I would love to just write Ehrlich.
He's an incredible character. I absolutely love him as well. Now, I told you this morning I thought Silicon Valley was the best TV show since Seinfeld for me personally, partly because I have an obsession with Silicon Valley and with nerd culture, and I've noticed all these little things in the show that nobody would ever get. Just amazing little trivia bits and pieces all over the place, including a tribute in one scene to the Twit Network. and we were told that a big Twit fan works on the show and worked that in. And I've also learned that co-creator Mike Judge once worked as a Silicon Valley test engineer, and that Alec Berg's brother worked for Microsoft, co-founder Paul Allen. It seems like everyone involved in the show really knows the subject matter. Is that really the case among the writers? Is everybody on the staff really, really into technology and into Silicon Valley?
There's a spectrum, but yeah, I mean, you did your homework, man. I'm surprised you know all those things you just mentioned. But yeah, Alec's brother is a techie. Mike Judge was a programmer, and yeah, they're kind of like, it's kind of eerie. They really follow tech. They read the blogs, and they all, when I joined, they all were reading tech blogs, and they know some of the TechCrunch guys. Two of the new writers this year went to Stanford, and so they know a lot of people at startups, and another guy worked in New York and had a lot of friends in the startup scene there. He went to Wharton. So, yeah, everybody's kind of, they're kind of into that world. And the other thing they did last year, and they have them back this year, is they hired a sort of tech consultant to kind of be an interface with the Valley, and he's with us again this year. So, yeah, they really make a huge effort to try to make things happen the way they could or would or might happen in real life. They want it to be real. They want it to kind of resonate in Silicon Valley, I think, is Mike Judge's idea, that you want to at least win over that audience and then go from there. Now, that said, the primary mission is to be funny. So, I mean, I've seen articles where people go like, oh, that would never happen that way. And it's like, well, yeah, because it's TV and it's comedy. And, like, if you watched Seinfeld, you'd know, you have liberties, right, and you have license. And that was when you mentioned the comparison to Seinfeld, it's interesting because Alec Berg was on Seinfeld for years and years. Only like 100 episodes of Seinfeld he worked on him. He didn't write them, obviously didn't write them all, but he was a staff writer and worked his way up on Seinfeld. And then he was one of the writers on Curb Your Enthusiasm. So he really comes from that Seinfeld school of comedy, the Larry David school. And then Mike Judge obviously is Mike Judge, so he's both Beavis and Butthead and Office Space and Idiocracy. So he has a different school. The interesting thing about The Room is you have Mike Judge, who is like a huge name in comedy in the 90s for doing animated stuff and Office Space. And then you have Alec Berg, who came from the other big school of the 90s, which was the Seinfeld school. And you have these two guys in the same room, like sitting next to you, like they're there every day. Like you're sitting across from them, and they're really funny and really smart, but it's sort of like, it's like getting drafted to play on the Yankees. It's like, shit, these guys are right. And everybody else is really good, too. These are all, like, really experienced screenwriters. Like, man, oh, man. And then there's me down at the end of the table just kind of, like, hanging on by my fingertips.
Well, it seems like an impossible task because, I mean, I watch the show, and I'm laughing my head off at all this super inside baseball stuff, which is also funny to other people in the room who are not aware of the inside baseball. It's both hilarious to a lay audience, and it's just red meat for people who really know about technology culture. And so it's just, in that sense, it's really quite an amazing thing. And I can't wait for season 2 and looking forward to your contributions to that. Dan Lyons, as we said, writes for HBO Silicon Valley. Now, are you still, did you take a leave of absence from your previous job, or did you leave that permanently?
No, I'm just on a leave from HubSpot, and this is only a 14-week contract. They write the show. They write the whole season in the summertime, and so by mid-September or so, they have all the episodes written, and then they shoot starting in October, and then they'll air in the spring. So
okay.
I was only hired for the writing part of the season, not for the production part. So yeah, it's just a 14-week thing, and I figured it's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime, adventure for me, and so it's and it has been. It's really
well, it just
amazingly developed, but yeah.
Yeah, it just sounds awesome, and I'm glad you're on it. It's really thrilling to speak to you about it, and of course, if you'd like to follow Dan Lyons on Twitter, it's Real Dan Lyons on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dan, and talking about Silicon Valley.
Oh, thank you, guys. Yeah,
thanks, Dan.
Well, Don, looks like Facebook, their earnings report really changed things for Facebook.
Yeah, so, a quick little follow-up. Yesterday, you reported, Mike, that, Facebook had, a great earnings report, and the company's stock price has now gone through the roof. When we checked it a couple of hours ago, the company is valued at about $193 billion. We haven't seen it since then, so it might be somewhere around there, but that makes it worth more than AT&T. It's just a few $billions shy of the valuation of IBM. And it also, which I think is very important, worth noting that Facebook's share price has doubled in the last year. And it's also making Mark Zuckerberg not only $1.6 billion richer, but richer than Amazon's own Jeff Bezos and Google co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Very, very interesting. Zuckerberg's now the 16th richest person in the world. And although he's not even close to Apple in terms of valuation, Facebook has been growing in leaps and bounds. And who knows if there's any slowing down here.
Yeah, they seem to have cracked the code for mobile advertising, and so they're doing great. And, once again, Mark Zuckerberg is only 30 years old, and he is doing pretty well. It's good work if you can get it. Well, Amazon has a pending request for permission from the FAA to test delivery drones, as we all know. And it may not help their case that an Amazon employee was caught buzzing the Seattle Space Needle with a drone this week. A local police report said that several calls to police reported seeing a quadricopter with a camera smash into the window of the Space Needle's observation deck. They said the drone then flew into the window of a nearby hotel where police found an out-of-town Amazon employee with a drone. The employee said he didn't crash in the window, though, and he showed them the video to prove it. No charges were filed. Yeah, man, Amazon and those drones, they love those drones, Don Reisinger.
Yeah, I hope it just doesn't crash into my house next. That'd be kind of crappy. Amazon loves those drones, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those drones. You know, the FAA is essentially saying, okay, we're going to make this okay. So whether it's Amazon, it's Google, who knows? All these companies could have drones pretty soon. They're going to be drones all over us, Mike. It won't be long now. It won't be long. We're going to have drones all over us. We'll be going back and forth to work in drones. You heard it here first.
I don't think it's a drone if a person is in it. But anyway,
well, technically, if it picks you up, I think it is.
Well,
Think about it.
I'll think about that. And in the meantime, that is the tech news today. Don Reisinger, thank you so much for joining us. Don Reisinger is our Friday co-anchor. And thanks again for coming in today.
Hey, thanks a lot. Had a great time, Mike.
All right. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, Yahoo, RSS, and many other options. Choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. And please follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Tech News Today TV. And send us your thoughts and opinions. Send email to tnt@twit.tv. And don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name is Mike Elgan. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you Monday.